Hello, BookTube. Well, welcome back to March Mystery Madness. This is a venerable BookTube event, 8 years old, put on by Elizabeth at Lizzie Fay Loves Books and a bunch of other co-hosts. I'm a co-host this year, as I have been for the last few years. I love reading murder mysteries. This is designed to celebrate murder mysteries. I read a lot of them anyway, but I read more of them in March because of March Mystery Madness, now that I know that the weird little kingdom of BookTube exists. And this March Mystery Madness, I think now that March is winding down, it's pretty clear that I can draw some larger pictures of what this March Mystery Madness has been, and it has clearly dealt with authority. It has clearly dealt with not so much detecting crime as what you do with the criminal. I'm not sure that I like that as an emphasis. That wasn't intentional on my part, but we've been talking about these two axes. Who is doing the detecting? And who has the authority to do something about the result of the detecting? And I've read a lot of murder mysteries in March where those are the same thing, where we are led to believe that the police will solve the crime, and they are invested with the power to do something about it. I've gone away from that a little. I've reread some mysteries because the theme for this March Mystery Madness is lather, rinse, repeat, and I've been concentrating on the repeat part. So I've been reading stuff that is rereads. And I've gone away from that a little and read some Golden Age murder mysteries where it's all about the cleverness of the detective, who is an amateur and is not connected with he doesn't have any kind of enforcement authority at all. It is assumed in those early Golden Age mysteries that merely knowing who is guilty will inevitably trigger all the rest of it. So the key to that mystery is figuring out who is guilty and how they did it. And then the law will take its courses from there. In fact, a lot of characters in those Golden Age mysteries actually say that line, that the law will take its courses from there. The snagging point for me this March is that, of course, in 21st century America, we know the law doesn't take its course from there. The law doesn't do that. So finding out who did it is like leading you to the edge of a cliff, and then you still don't know what's going to happen. You still don't know what's going to happen. In specific dateable context for the time when I'm making this video, I will just innocently point out that it is a felony to make a threat to a Manhattan district attorney. That is a felony. Apart from anything else that Manhattan DA is investigating about you, threatening a DA is a felony. For normal people, when the law takes its course, you get arrested and held in jail incommunicado until the time of your trial if you do that. There's a rather prominent public figure in America who just recently did that and is never going to have a single moment of legal accountability for that felony. So in 21st century America, it's really kind of difficult to jump off that cliff. In a 21st century murder mystery, if a character just complacently said, well, the law will take it from here, I believe the reader would laugh. And that's coloring my reading of all the mysteries I've been doing in March. It's causing problems for me in March, especially since once that became an issue, once I started thinking about those two axes, I saw it everywhere. I had not realized until this March Mystery Madness how many murder mysteries are investigated and more or less solved by the people who also have the authority to physically arrest the suspect. I know that seems very commonplace, and I should have realized that, but it's kind of amazing how that has grown in the last half century. And that is true for today's book. This is from the early 1980s. This is Passing Strange by Catherine Aird with this great, great cover. I wonder if the cover artist is credited. Probably not. In the 80s, they probably didn't do it. No, the cover artist is not credited. But there was, who did this? Bantam did a whole run of Catherine Aird, who's one of my favorite mystery authors. They did a whole run of her with absolutely fantastic cover artwork. And this is a story of a small village that is having a fair. Local booths. There's a fortune teller, obviously, here you've got on the cover, but there's also an otter. Someone brings an otter in a water tank that people can pay, their 2 bits to go and see. There's all sorts of other things. There's all sorts of booths in this fair, and someone is found murdered at the fair. it's entirely likely that Catherine Aird went to a county fair with some friends of hers, and because she was a murder mystery writer, she found that, well, what if a dead body was found here? Uh, and Detective Inspector C.D. Sloan is brought in. He comes to the town alone. Because this is a classic murder mystery, he is not armed. He's a British DI. He's not, doesn't have a gun, doesn't even have a billy club. He doesn't have a sergeant with him. He just comes alone in order to investigate the crime. And that investigation involves, I mean, the book starts off with the colorful locals, and then we get Sloane's investigation. And his investigation is exactly what you expect it to be. He's going to figure out where all the booths were at the fair. He's going to figure out who was at each of those booths. He's going to figure out who left their booth at around the time when the person was probably killed. He's going to find out the histories of every single person at the fair with the deceased. He's going to find out all about the deceased family. And he's going to do that by systematically asking questions to the locals and then checking their stories against the other. With the key word there being systematically. And so after chapter 1, you know exactly what you're going to get in this book. You know exactly what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. I'm not saying that you know who did it, because Catherine Aird clearly puts her storytelling priority is clearly on keeping you guessing about who did it. If we read the Decalogue of murder mystery stories, and one of those commandments is that the guilty party must be present from the beginning. They can't show up. It can't be that a random murderer shows up in chapter 30. The guilty party has to be there from the beginning, and there has to be at least the potential for you to figure out who it is yourself. I guess that's true in this book. I read this when it first came out, and then I just recently reread it for March Mystery Madness. And I, like a good murder mystery reader, I had completely forgotten who did it. I had completely forgotten the solution. And that's because the solution is a little bit preposterous. But it doesn't matter. It's still, these are really, really enjoyable murder mysteries. But I read it this time just thinking about D.I. Sloan. I kept thinking about, why is this more palatable than a lot of the police procedurals that I've read in March? And I can't help but think that it's because it was a different era. Sloan is not armed. He does not have the coercive ability of the law, except by implication. I mean, he is the law by implication. So people, until the end of the book, no one can actually threaten him, and no one can openly lie to him. And it's kind of understood by all of the colorful locals that if he wanted to, he could run them all in. And it's kind of understood that if he wanted to do that, he wouldn't need muscle. He wouldn't need to call in some constables. He would simply tell you, I'm running you in, and you would go along, because the machinery in place, you know that the machinery in place would grind you to paste if you didn't do it. If you didn't just voluntarily do it. It's the standard old tag gesture from British crime fiction, which is that the policeman simply puts his hand on your shoulder. That's all. He just puts his hand on your shoulder. You're coming with me. I don't need a gun. I don't need a billy club. I don't need a squad of people. I don't need handcuffs. I am the embodiment of the law. I'm touching you. You will come with me. There's a lot of that in this book. And yet I found it completely palatable. I love the way this author goes about her business. I just think it's fantastic. But also, whatever elements of those police procedurals in this March that have been bothering me were not present in this book. So which leads me immediately to wonder what those elements specifically are. But in the meantime, and I will wonder about those, because I've been avoiding police heavy stuff for the last week in March Mystery Madness, but I'm not going to do that for the rest of March. And tonight's book I will just pick whatever. And if it's entirely a police procedural, as it very well may be, I've been avoiding Scandi Noir for March Mystery Madness because I find it so drab. But I have a couple, so I'll probably do that tonight, which is explicitly a police procedural. But whatever those elements are that bug me, they're not present here. And instead, we get some wonderful stuff. I want to read you just one passage here uh, about once Sloane gets going, once he starts talking to the various locals to figure out what they're hiding and where everybody was. He wants to know their stories, but he mainly wants to know who had the opportunity to kill the deceased, who had the opportunity to do it. The rest of it is noise. And he doesn't put it that way, but he mentions here the chapter 6 begins with him questioning someone, and Catherine Eyre always digresses. She doesn't. It isn't just bald narration of what Sloane does next. Maybe that's another reason why I found it palatable. She often has atmospheric digressions, and I like them. She writes, for instance, here when Sloane says, "Just a few questions, sir," she digresses. The gentle art of questioning did not have its Isaac Walton putting pen to paper and advising from a wealth of experience on how it should be done. Isaac Walton here referring to The Complete Angler, the encyclopedic book on fishing. Sort of Isaac Walton here is meant to be a definitive guide to some subject. Putting pen to paper and advising from a wealth of experience on how it should be done. There were, in fact, very few guidebooks for the inquiring policeman which laid down the best way to interrogate either potential witness or an actual suspect. The successful examination of the one and the cross-examination of the other were both skills that the budding police officer had to learn himself the hard way, by trial and error. Trial and success didn't make the same mark. Trial and error were what a man learned from. You get little elaborations like that all throughout this book, all the way to the end. And right at the end, when the tension is at its highest, you get one of those little digressions, which kind of one of the reasons why I really like this author. So I went back to an author this time around that I really like. I think it's only fair that maybe tonight I go back to an author that I don't like. So maybe I'll give that a try, and I'll report back as we wind down 2023's March Mystery Madness. We've only got this week to go. So I will report back on my next reading adventure here, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.